Well, inside this strange-looking fleshy green pod is one of Georgia's greatest natural resources, and that is the pecan. And a lot of people don't recognize them from this shape, but of course you'll recognize them in their trademark sort of tiger stripe shells. And we are in the center of pecan country in Georgia, down in Camilla, Georgia, which is just a few miles from Baconton, where they have their annual pecan festival. And standing in this giant orchard, and actually there's probably thousands of pounds of nuts right above me that are anxious to jump on my head. And they might actually with this wind going on out here. But we're here obviously to harvest some pecans, to see how pecans make their way from the farm to the table. And we're going to end up back in the kitchen and put together a whole menu based on probably Georgia's most famous nut. Well, I've learned something about working with pecans, and that is whenever you think you need 1 cup of pecans, go ahead and have 2 cups, because you'll find yourself snacking on them the entire time. And of course, we did that on the entire ride back from Camilla, Georgia. And I want to do a pecan pie, because I kind of feel like you're almost obligated by law to do a pecan pie on a pecan show. But I'm not going to do your traditional pecan pie. I want to do something a little different, and that is a cream pecan pie. And for this, we're going to use half and half, and I've got about 1/4 of a cup of half and half. And that just kind of gives the pecan pie a little bit different dimension. And rather than using corn syrup or dark corn syrup, which is sort of traditional around here, we're going to use maple syrup. And I really love the flavor of maple syrup, like real maple syrup with pecans. It's just fantastic. And I have that was half a cup of maple syrup. I'm going to use half a cup of brown sugar. Goes in there as well. And the whole thing kind of gets bound together with eggs, a sort of traditional thing. We're going to use 3 eggs in this concoction. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to have another sort of interesting element in here, and that is going to be ginger. Now, ginger, if you use too much of it, can be a little spicy, a little hot. So I just want to have enough to kind of perfume this whole thing. And I have some ginger that's actually been in the freezer since, gosh, I guess probably, 2 or 3 months. But it actually freezes really well, and when it's frozen, it grates really well. So again, not much. I'm probably only putting maybe 1/2 of a teaspoon in here. Could even be 1/4 of a teaspoon. Of course, I'm not measuring because I don't really tend to do that too often. But again, just to flavor this up, if you go too much, it's spicy. We don't want a spicy pecan pie. But that ginger really adds something to it. So then I'm going to use about 2 tablespoons of melted butter, and of course butter is great in anything, so we'll add the butter in there and give this a good whisk. And for this recipe, we're using just about 1 cup of pecan halves and pieces, and so about 1 cup goes in there. And this is really, really simple. I mean, it's almost embarrassingly simple, but you want to have, for me anyway, when I'm doing a meal, the dessert is sort of the last thing that you think about, or in this case, it's the first thing we think about because it's going to take some time in the oven. But you know, if I'm going to work on a meal, I don't want to spend all day working on a dessert. It's just my way of thinking. And so in that line of thinking, I have a ready-made pie crust because, again, just for time constraints. And this is one that you buy, you just roll it out. And I've just sort of just loosely crimped it into an 8x8 little ceramic dish that I have here. But you can also buy one of the round, the ready-made round pie crust would work just as well. You can buy those frozen. So in goes our mix, and this works just perfect for this size. And this is going to spend about 45 minutes in a 325-degree oven. So I don't want to do it too hot. I think typically with pies you do it a little hotter than that. But I don't want the edges of the crust to burn, and that's just, I've found that to be just sort of the perfect temperature, 325. And again, about 45 minutes, and you'll see it'll actually kind of puff up a little bit, and after it puffs, it'll settle down as it cools. But I want to get this going first so we have some time to work on our other pecan dishes for this show. So into the oven we go, 325 for about 40 to 45 minutes. So while the pie spends the next 40 minutes in the oven, we're going to put together some spiced pecans using a little bit of brown sugar and curry powder. I love the flavor of curry with nuts, and pecans are excellent for this. So I've just taken some pecan halves and toasted them in the oven, actually while the oven was preheating for the pie, for about 10 to 12 minutes, just until they get crunchy. And they can burn really easily, so be careful of that, because once you burn them, the flavor is completely gone, and there's no going back. They're ruined at that point. And how do I know that? Because I've ruined a few in my time. So. But I will say that was when I was young and foolish. But at any rate, so we're going to take these toasted pecans here, and spice them up with a little bit. I've got some melted butter. This is about a tablespoon or so of melted butter, and a little bit of brown sugar. And you can do this to taste, and you could also do this with honey. But I love the sweetness. It's almost like a praline when you have the sugar in with pecans. And we're going to take a good happy pinch of sea salt. And if you're using a curry powder, which I'm going to be using as well, check the saltiness of it, because sometimes when you can buy a ready-made curry powder, it might be already a little salty, in which case you wouldn't want to add additional salt. And then you just kind of do this by your gut feeling, not too much, but just enough to coat these. And these are going to go back in the oven while we have the oven hot, and while the pie is doing its thing, they're going to spend some time, and so that sugar is going to melt and kind of make everything nice and sticky gooey. And then lastly, we're going to drizzle some pumpkin seed oil, and this is actually roasted pumpkin seed oil, and has a wonderful nutty flavor. And again, with pecans, it makes sense there. But you can see how dark this is. Gorgeous stuff. And to be honest, it's a little expensive. It's the kind of thing you wouldn't use every day. But pecans, I think, are a special occasion food. You can afford to put a little nice things in there every now and then. In fact, I've made this before with truffle oil, which is another expensive oil. But again, it's not the kind of thing you use every day. But this is the kind of thing you would have for special guests. So give this a good stir. Let's just toss them this way. It's a little easier. And you can't smell, but I can smell, again, that pumpkin seed oil is fantastic with the curry powder, which has some great flavors in there, like cumin and turmeric and fenugreek and things you don't necessarily find on their own too often. But if you find a good curry powder, those flavors are fantastic with the nuts. So those go back on our baking tin here. And these are great as a snack. In fact, some years our family's given away spiced nuts as a Christmas gift, or as a side for a salad, or even later on kind of bust it up and use them as a topping on a piece of pork chop or something like that. So very versatile and very yummy, and one of those things too that make more than you think you need, because you're going to end up eating them as soon as they come out of the oven. So these are just going to go a handful of minutes in the oven, maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, just until you'll smell as they're getting ready. But don't burn them. Very important, because they can and they will burn.
Well, the good thing about our operation here is that they're grown locally, they're processed locally, and we ship them locally to a lot of local restaurants and bakeries within the state of Georgia. We have a lot of customers that specify and request for Georgia-grown pecans, because we grow some particular varieties that's just grown and they're indignant just for this region. And so desirables are grown in other states, but mostly predominantly in the state of Georgia. We have a lot of customer requests, just desirable varieties, and some other varieties that's just grown in the state of Georgia. So Georgia nuts are in high demand.